Well, hello again, and welcome back to the Trim the Wick podcast. My name is Dan James, and I am so glad that you are with us again this week. Last week, if you missed last week's podcast, I want to encourage you to go ahead and pause this one and go back to that one, because that one is part one of our two-part series here on how to have a strong marriage. And if you didn't listen to that one, please go back and listen to it. It's fantastic. We talk about communication and how everything starts with communication in the marriage. And so if you missed that one, please go back, listen to it, enjoy that one. And then this week, we are going to talk about the next two things that are so important in your marriage. That's intimacy and sex, and unity and decision-making process and thought process in your marriage. You know, it's so important. These three things together just build a strong husband and wife together for a strong marriage. So, guys, thank you again for being with us this week. We appreciate you. And if you do like this podcast, like and subscribe. Let other people know. If there's other folks that could be benefited by this podcast, please let them know. We'd love to help them out as well with what we're talking about and teaching on. Okay, guys, let's jump into it. Here's part two of making your marriage stronger. What's number two, babe?
Well, sex.
Well, yeah, that's what we want to talk about a lot now. Honestly, we were going to say if the kids are out listening, it's time for them to
put their little earbuds in or send them in the other room.
Yeah, give them the iPad. Because,
actually,
we're not going to do that.
We're not going to get into mechanics here.
No, if you're married, you understand how things work. Hopefully,
right.
But you know what? Sex is a huge part of a marriage.
It is.
That intimacy between man and woman, that is something that it changes. It's different than any other relationship you have in your life.
Right. And a healthy sex life in your marriage has as a bedrock great communication, because one of the first things that you're going to come to, and again, this goes to what we were talking about with backgrounds and filters that we bring to a marriage. We bring backgrounds and filters and preferences when it comes to sex. And so you need to be able to have really honest conversations, not in the moment.
That's not really the greatest time to have that bullet point conversation.
But you need to talk about your expectations when it comes to the marriage bed,
Or should we call them sexpectations?
There you go. Look at you, wordsmith.
That's horrible. I was going to say that's a dad joke, but that's horrible. That's a husband joke.
But you need to be able to talk about those things, and you need to be able to talk about, this, there's something that just kind of grosses me out. I don't think I want to consider that. I've got a background, and there's been some kind of sexual abuse in the background. Right. That stuff needs to be addressed up front, because you don't want to inadvertently hurt your spouse or bring up, traumatic things that need to be worked through at a time. And
that's something that I think affects guys probably more than girls, but I'm sure it goes both ways. But there's definitely a feeling of that you're not adequate enough for your wife or for your spouse, if they don't even want to have a conversation about doing something sexually. And again, there might be something in your past. There might be something that you were raised being taught. There might be just something where it's like, I just don't know if I want to do that.
Yeah.
That just doesn't sound like any fun.
Have that conversation.
But you need to have that conversation on a level of just, I ain't doing that. Or that's gross.
Right. But if there is legitimate trauma in the background, you need to, as a couple, go get some help and work through healing on that, because that will absolutely impact your marriage.
Yes.
So seek out that help. If it's just a thing of, oh no,
Yeah.
Our marriage came to a place, I mean, y'all, I grew up Southern Baptist, and sex was a dirty word. You didn't,
true love waits, purity,
the purity culture. And, I saw a reel the other day, and it was a POV. You're both Christians and you just got married and it's your wedding night, and it's her sitting on the end of the bed in a wedding gown and him sitting in his tux on the end of the bed. And they're both just kind of looking off at the ceiling, and y'all, it shouldn't be that way.
Right.
God created the intimacy of the sexual relationship for the marriage to be a beautiful thing and a unifying thing. And so, identify those hangups that you came to it with.
Right.
And then part of marriage biblically is giving yourself wholly to one another. And so it's very hard. I'm going to say this as gently as I can. Please don't hear judgment here, but it's very hard to say that you are giving yourself fully to your spouse if you go, oh yeah, no, that part of you is just gross and I don't even want to think about it.
Right.
Your spouse is hearing there's part of you that you're not willing to give, and there's part of them that you're not willing to receive.
Right.
And y'all, that'll do harm.
Yeah. And again, this goes back, this is why we started off with communication, that it's so important to actually, as marrieds, young marrieds, or 5-10 years into your marriage. For us, it was about 15 years into the marriage when we actually started talking about sexual things in our marriage.
And we had kids by then.
Yeah,
so, I mean, it wasn't like we weren't practicing.
Right.
It was just we weren't having real, open, honest conversation.
Right. And we didn't realize that there were actually things that we were doing that was hurting one another emotionally and mentally. Right. And we had no idea because we never sat down and actually talked about it.
Right.
And talked about, okay, why this, or okay, this looks like something you like, why? And having those deep conversations, in sex.
Yep. Again,
with sex,
religious hangups, got us in trouble there. But,
yep.
We came to a place where it is our belief that in a healthy marriage where trauma is not, trauma has been dealt with and trauma has been healed, in a healthy marriage of two spouses seeking to honor one another fully and give themselves to one another fully. In general, broadly speaking, if it's I don't know if I'm into that, it should be we'll try anything once policy.
Yeah.
If it's not something that's harmful and it's not something that is,
sinful,
unbiblical, we'll try anything once.
Right.
And if it's just did that, but that was not my gig.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to have preferences.
There's that communication.
Yeah.
And there's that moving forward. Because one of the things that in this is that the marriage bed is so special. And it's, again, like I said earlier, it's something that is different in this relationship than in any other relationship you have in your life.
Right. It is a defining characteristic of a godly marriage.
Yes.
The two shall become one flesh. And that's not true in any other relationship that you have.
And guess what? You're going to have to work at it. Yeah. And you're going to have to talk to each other. And you're going to have to sit down and have those uncomfortable, awkward, weird conversations and say, hey, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Hey, I like this. I like when you brush my hair for 2 hours watching a hockey match, and you're going, wait, that's not sex. Yeah, it is, because usually what happens right
intimacy.
After the brushing the hair for 2 hours is that connection is there and sex follows. So there are just so many things. Again, it goes back to communication. Some of the things that we want to say on this as we're talking about this is that we kind of made a joke about the purity culture and everything like it. We do believe that sex is meant for the husband and the wife in the context of the marriage. And this is one of the things that is so important, is that you need to keep the marriage bed pure.
Right.
And so as we're talking about all this stuff of, well, we'll try this one, we're not talking about defiling the marriage bed.
Yeah. We're not talking about bringing other people into
Right.
the marriage with you. Even through the means of like romance books that get real smutty, or pornography. That is bringing someone else into your
Right.
thought life and into how you approach and think about sex. And it turns your eyes away from your spouse.
Right.
One of the pet peeves that I have had, it just makes me so angry, because it is adultery.
Yes.
Jesus said if a man even turns and looks and thinks of bedding another woman, he's committed the sin in his mind.
Right.
Well, ladies, that's true of us too. And so when you're sitting there and going, oh, but no, my husband knows that I've got, this is my celebrity free pass person, it'll never happen. It'll never happen because I'll never come across them. But if I ever come across them, they're my free pass. No, you have brought somebody else into your marriage bed. That is a betrayal of your spouse. Please don't do that.
Right. Yeah. Again, these are those things that are so important that I think as married couples, we go, oh, we can handle it. Or we don't have to communicate, or we don't have to talk about sex, or we can have the wink, wink, I can look, but I can't touch, mentality. And all that does is just, it undermines what your marriage actually is. And we're wondering, why are so many people getting divorced? Why are marriages in the struggle that they are? Why are our kids, those kids that are in their early 20s and teens now, they're going, oh, I'm never going to get married. I don't want to get married. It's things like this that we've allowed to creep into marriages that basically is undermining it, and it's setting it on a situation where it's teetering, and at any moment it could fall over. Those are those things that, Jesus talks about, that when we have those feelings, if you look at someone and you are drawn to them, that you can immediately confess that as sin and be cleansed of that and move on. We talk about forgiveness between husband and wife. Let me tell you, the best forgiveness is when you understand that your Father in heaven forgives you for when you make mistakes, and when you start living that life of going, you know what, I've been tempted, or I've given in a little bit to temptation. I receive forgiveness. It's going to help you forgive your spouse and have forgiveness in your home even that much more.
And conversely, the more you guard that thought life, when you understand that the physical act of your sex life begins with your thought life, the more you guard that, the more you protect it, the more you turn your thoughts actively and deliberately towards your spouse. I'm going to notice when he looks really attractive. I'm going to notice, the things that he does that make me want to be physically with him. I'm going to nurture those thoughts in my life. You will find yourself less and less inclined to look outside of your marriage. And so that safeguarding of that thought life safeguards the physical. And it creates that two becoming one flesh bond where you really are as one, and you can trust that in each other, because you know that all the way down to their thoughts, they're not straying. You're not ever hearing those harmful darts from the enemy of, you're good and I've been with you and everything, but if I ever had a chance, You don't need to be putting those thoughts and that distrust into your spouse.
Right. So we want to make sure that you have a healthy sex life as number 2 when it comes to having a fantastic and a good marriage. Yeah. The third thing and the last thing we want to talk about this evening is you need to have priorities and unity in your marriage. Yeah. And here's the thing, in your life, just in general in your life, if you don't ever set any priorities in your life, if you don't ever set any goals or anything to be actually achieving, your life just becomes mediocre. Your life just becomes a doldrum of every day in and out. This is all I'm doing. I just go to work. I come home. I play video games. I go to work. I come home, or, I cut the grass. I go to work. I come home. I got to fix the car. And you end up with this doldrummy life. No one gets excited for the mediocre, for mediocrity. We want exceptional lives. And I believe one of the things that helps couples is when they are prioritizing things correctly, they're setting goals correctly, and they are united too.
And again, this comes back to how you view your marriage. If you just, we talked about that at first when we were first married, we were just kind of like, oh yeah, we'll communicate. Obviously, we'll talk. Right. We like each other. If you just assume that your priorities line up with your spouse's priorities and never actually talk about it and never actually set those priorities and go, okay, these things are important to us as a couple. If you never have those discussions, you're going to end up drifting apart.
Yes.
Because I'm going to go, well, this is important to me and he's just not joining me on it. So I guess he's going to go over and do what's important to him, whatever.
Right.
You want to actively, deliberately, and you're hearing that repeated a lot.
Right.
Nothing about building a strong marriage just happens.
Right.
You have to actively, deliberately move towards this.
Yeah.
But it starts with viewing that as, okay, I want to set some priorities and I know what's important to me. I need to know what's important to you. And then we need to see where those match and where we're going to have some compromise.
Yeah.
And
because there are different things that couples you're going to look at and go, this is the thing that's most important. For some folks, there are going to be things of, I need to have the bills paid on time.
Right.
And it stresses me out if the bills aren't paid. If we're paying a overcharge or whatever, or the finances are in shambles and we don't know what's going on. So we need to make it a priority that we sit down and we balance the budget.
We have a system for this that we agree on.
We have a system that we put together that we go, this is how we're going to do it. I come home or you come home and, there's stuff all over the yard, and the yard's grown up or whatever. Well, we need to have priorities. Okay, well, how do we want our house to look like? And sometimes it's a give and take. Well, actually, not sometimes. Pretty much all the time. Yeah. It's a give and take. It was like going, okay, this is what I really like. I like to walk in the house and have a house that's completely no toys on the floor. But I know that my wife has been at home working all day with 3 kids, and she looks like she's a little, exasperated. Done is the word is, here's where I'm going to with that communication before I walk in and go, oh, this is the, I'm going to walk in and go, okay, let me read the room a little bit before I even say a word.
Right.
And let me see what's going on. Let me communicate with my spouse. Let me communicate with my wife and go, hey, babe, how's everything going? I'm not trying to fish. Right. I'm not trying to, I'm just want to know how was the day going and what's going on and stuff. And that's where that communication and then.
Well, and understanding that if having the house clutter-free is a priority to you, understanding that I don't get to impose that and expect my spouse to make that happen for me. We've agreed upon priorities together as a married couple, and we're going to have to work those priorities together. And those things are going to change over time. You know, when we first married, there were no kids in the picture.
Yeah.
And so we were both working. We were both going to school, working towards our degrees. We had work was a priority. Here we go. Flip that around. Work was a priority. Education was a priority.
Yep.
You know, we had some things. We were working towards ministry. Ministry was a priority in our life. Kids were an eventuality.
Yeah, for us.
And we wanted them. But one of the things that we had already talked through before we ever started trying for kids was, if kids come on the scene, one of the things that was a high priority for me, I'm not sure that it mattered one way or the other to you, but it was a high priority to me that once we started having kids, that as much as possible, I wouldn't work outside the home.
Right.
I wanted to be the stay-at-home mom. And I was for the majority of our kids' growing up years. You know, I had jobs here and there. When the priority became, hey, we have this family that all need to eat. Yep. You know, and so
we've got to make some changes.
So we teamed up on those priorities, but even then we worked it out to where my work schedule was opposing your work schedule, so that somebody was home with the kids all the time. I didn't want them in daycare. That was a priority.
Right.
And so you need to talk through those things and make sure that you're on the same page with what's really, really important, and that the things that aren't important, you know, we'll let it go. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. I do want to throw in this, as we're talking about the priorities, the big priority in marriage is your marriage.
Always.
And the making sure that this is good.
Yep.
And that this is prioritized and this is worked on. And we focus on this. Right. You know, you brought up kids and stuff and how important it is that when you have kids in your life, there are some things that changes. There are some things that are readjusted because, let me tell you, the kids demand attention.
And your responsibility changes.
Yes.
They are dependent on you, and you have to take that seriously.
Right. But your ultimate priority is going to be, number one, to your spouse.
Yeah.
And then to your kids. You know, you said something a while back. You said, you know, my vow is to my spouse, but my responsibility is to my kids. And, you know, that's a huge statement.
Yeah, there's a distinction there.
Yeah, because a lot of times, again, going back to those things of what causes divorce, one of the things on the top 10 reasons was kids.
Yeah.
And misunderstanding and mispriorities when it came to children. So it's very important that you are setting those priorities, that you are talking about them. Again, going back to communication. Oh my gosh, how many times? That's why it's number one.
We said that was the bedrock. There's a reason.
You know, but setting those things up and knowing that it's just going to make your life easier. It's going to make your marriage better when you talk about these things beforehand. Right. Because you know what? Stuff's going to happen.
It is.
You know, stuff's going to break. You're going to get fired. You're going to have family members who pass away. There's going to be hurricanes that are coming or fires or whatever the thing is that is going to shake your marriage.
Yep.
And if you have some of these things in place, you have the priorities already set in place, you know, you can weather some of those storms a lot easier.
Because I made a vow to you and I intend to keep my vow. That is priority number one in the relationship between us.
Right.
And understanding that from a believer's perspective, that vow is not just between the two of you. That is a vow that you made before God.
Right.
And so he's at the center of that. That's the glue,
you
know, that holds the marriage together, is prioritizing that vow above everything else. Children are a blessing and an inheritance from the Lord.
Yep.
They do not replace or take the place of that
No.
marriage vow.
Exactly. Yeah, I've always thought, I was married before we had kids, and I hope to be married after we have kids.
After they're up and out, we're still going to be married.
We're still going to be married, and so it's so important. One of the other things I think with the priorities and being united is exactly that. We need to make sure that when we're doing the decision making, that we are coming together in unity. And, that doesn't always mean that I get my way, you get your way. We're going to like make it to where, I buy something and you buy something, or I get this.
Yeah, it's not this even 50-50 split on,
no.
well, you got your way last time, so this time I get my way.
Yeah.
No.
But we need to be able to come together and understand that there are decisions that we need to make that are going to be difficult decisions, and we need to make sure that we're united in making those decisions and that our priorities are balanced.
Absolutely. And there will be times in your marriage where a decision has to be made and one or the other of you is not present.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an immediate decision that needs to be made. And that's where this background of honoring your vow to one another, trusting one another, communicating well, has hopefully built the trust to the point where you can go ahead and make that call.
Right.
And do what needs to be done in the moment. And then when your spouse is available and comes into it, they go, okay, so this is where we are. Let's go forward together.
Right.
So that there's not a whole bunch of second guessing and recriminations. And no, I trust you, you trust me. And when one or the other of us has to make a judgment call, we trust that we can start where that call landed us and go from there. Right.
Well, and again, going back to communication, going back to all these things of that, if we've already had these conversations ahead of time, there's that, no, well, how could you have made that decision? No, we've already talked about it. We know the direction that we're going. Here's another thing that we wanted to talk about on this with having priorities is that you got to have away time and you got to have personal time.
You do.
And, we are one, we are together, but there are things that I have passions for and I love, and there are things that you have passions for and you love. And sometimes they're not the same thing.
Sometimes. Prime example, our daughter and I just had a wonderful, fun adventure. We went ziplining together. It was a blast.
Mm-hmm.
All the way up to the location where we were going to zip line, and then all the way back home, we had a fantastic time in the car listening to musicals and belting the songs. It was so much fun. You would have not wanted to be there, would you?
No,
not your gig.
I was happily doing something else, but but no. There is a healthy there of, having hobbies, having things that I personally enjoy. I love football. You're not going to sit and really watch football because you don't like it as much. That's fine.
I cared a lot about it when our kids were on the field, but if I'm not related to one of the players, I really could care less.
So there are things that we can have that are separate. There are things, and that's healthy and that's good as long as they're not things that are pulling us away.
Right.
They're not things that we're hiding.
Yes, there should never be a case of hiding things.
They're not things that we're doing, I'm doing this because I can't be with her. That's now you're going into a realm where now it's no longer a healthy encouragement thing.
Right.
Now it's an unhealthy thing that's actually pulling you away from your marriage.
Right. There should never be a thing of telling your spouse you're going out doing one thing and you do another.
Right.
There should never be hiding financials. If you're buying things and tucking them away and hiding them in accounts that your spouse doesn't know about, you need to really check that because that's not unity in the marriage. You have a priority that you're carrying that is not unifying you with your spouse. Have your own interests. Please have your alone time. I'm a person that needs alone time. And I absolutely need time with you, but I need time alone too.
Right.
And, you know, and you found that last year there were some things that you really needed to get alone and spend some time with God on. And,
Yep.
and you came back and you were like, I've never done the away alone retreat before. That was really awesome. And it's a good thing. It's not. And when you're having that alone time and when you're giving your spouse permission to go have that alone time, give that to them fully. Be excited for them. Encourage them to go involve in what feeds them and what builds them back up. Because then when they come back to you together, they're going to be more of themselves.
Yep.
There is more of them to offer you. And so, you know, encourage those things. Don't sit there and go, oh yeah, you go do your thing. I'll just sit here and wait for, you know, no, encourage that.
Yeah. It's healthy.
It is. And from time to time, join them in the things that you don't particularly enjoy.
Right.
Because you care about them. You want to share things with them.
I've been to a musical or two.
You took me to see Hello, Dolly.
We did. It was funny. It was great. I enjoyed it.
And I've been to a hockey game. So
it was fantastic. The last thing on this that we want to talk about is that you need to have priorities and unity in your spiritual foundation of your family.
Right.
And I know that this is kind of can get a little bit dicey with some folks because you might be a believer and your spouse isn't, or there might be some baggage in your past of different religious hurts and things like that. So you might both be believers, but one's definitely, they're never going to go to church again and things like that. But, you know, there's definitely a conversation, again, going back to that, of making sure that you have those spiritual foundations understood between you, because that is going to direct you in a lot of these things. Right. You know, when we're talking about the importance of keeping the marriage bed pure, when we're talking about the importance of the communication, and how that you need to make sure that when you're having an argument that you don't carry it on day after day, you don't let the sun go down in your anger. Right. You handle those things. You know, those are all biblical principles and stuff.
Ready forgiveness, ready grace. It's hard to have those just in your flesh if you don't have God at the center. Because
you're going to get hurt over and over and over again in marriages, because that's just the way it is. You're two different people that are trying to become one, and you're putting it together. There's going to be some friction.
There is.
So grace and forgiveness has got to be there, and it's got to flow from you and from your, not just your physical, because eventually your physical is going to give way. We've seen this before in families and in couples, and you need to make sure that you have that spiritual foundation together. There's a couple things that we kind of just wanted on this, and we're going to do it more of a, I don't know, let me just share. There's a couple things on spiritual foundations that, first of all, you know, we believe that the man is the spiritual lead of the home.
Yeah.
And it's his responsibility to take the lead, and you should be doing it, men. Yeah. Lead your wife in spiritual things. Pray. You know what? My wife is so much more of an encourager when it comes to biblical things with the children, even in her own life. With she's a reader, so she loves to pull out books and read things where I don't read that much. I'm actually getting better at it.
You are.
You know, but you've always got to be the lead when it comes to how the spiritual of your home is going to be, and praying for your family and leading out in your family.
Yeah. And guys, if there's anything that I can share with you from a wife's point of view, you don't have to be eloquent. You don't have to, you know, have some, you know, deep theological understanding. You need to love God, and you need to love your wife. Mm-hmm. And when you put your hand on her shoulder and you pray for her, know that that's going to reach her, and that's going to minister to her in a way that nothing else that you do can. And you don't have to lead spiritually by going, okay, it's after dinner Bible study. Let's do, it doesn't have to be this formal thing.
Right.
Let the love of Christ fill you so much that it overflows to her.
Right.
It's that simple.
Yeah. And I would even say, I mean, take the formal out of it and make it more just a flowing out of, you know, these are the things that we're going to do in our home. We want to learn more about God. We want to learn. We don't want to make it a ritual thing. We want to make it as our home. We believe in the Lord and we believe in Jesus and we read the Bible, you know, and
he was central to our vow to one another.
Right.
And so he's going to be central in our home.
Exactly. That's the other thing we wanted to mention is that, this is another conversation thing. You both need to know where you stand. Yeah. And you need to have that conversation in before you get married, but as your marriage grows, you know, we've been married now 33 years. So there are a lot of things in our belief system that we've changed, has matured. We come to more of an understanding. So the things that I believe now are very different than some of the things I believed when I was, 19 years old. Right?
Crazy how that works.
In boot camp. I'd only been a believer for a year. So there is a changing over time, a maturing in your beliefs over time. So you need to continue to have those conversations with your wife and your husband, because they're changing.
Yeah. None of this is a one and done.
Right.
You don't have these conversations at the beginning of your marriage and then go, cool, we are good.
Right.
This is ongoing work that you do for the rest of your life.
Yes. And that's a great thing. All right. So the last thing, marriage is worth fighting for.
Yes.
And listen, the most important thing, and I believe this 100%, and I can say this with 33 years past and everything else, but honestly, the most important thing is that marriage. My spouse, my wife, is so important to me because I'm at a point now where I've lived this time, 33 years. I've been married longer than I've been not married.
Yeah.
And, as we continue to grow, as we continue to our lives develop, it just gets better and better and better. But I see where I'm completed more and more and more with you than I would be without you. And so it is worth fighting for.
Every bit of it.
Yeah.
Just make sure that in fighting for your marriage, you're fighting together.
Right.
On the same team.
In unity.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, guys. Well, quick recap. We just want to say, hey, thank you again for being here tonight. And with our first live stream, teaching time, we're hoping to do a lot more of these. So hopefully you enjoyed it. And but just as a thing for you moving forward in your marriage and the things to keys, I guess, to have good marriages, communication, that physical intimacy, that sex, and then having priorities and being united in your priorities. And we believe if those are things that you make as a pillar in your marriage, that your marriage is going to be strong. Yeah. Your marriage is going to grow. Your marriage is going to grow bigger and closer together, and that becoming one becomes easier and easier.
And then as you have kids and you pass on that legacy, we're going to begin to heal that legacy of broken marriages that has been a problem in our nation. It starts in our marriages.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. If you want to learn more about what Becky and I do and Trim the Wick, you can go to trimthewick.com and got a bunch of stuff there for you.
And for the rest of this, well, not this month, right? For for the rest of next month, for the entire month of February, our blog posts and our podcasts, they're all going to focus on those great marriage relationships.
Yep.
And so keep an eye out for that.
All right, guys. Well, that's it for tonight. And we'll see you next time on the Trim Nook podcast, okay?
All right. Love y'all.
All right. Love you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.